start by telling us your name, degree, and year that you're in?
Yep. So my name's Rebecca, or Beck. I'm studying arts and I'm in second year.
Yeah. And what's your slogan for USU?
My slogan is Bright, Bold, Beck.
Cool.
And your colours?
I'm running on hot pink.
Oh, nice. Bright and bold. So why would you say you're running for the USU?
Okay, so I guess what's really driving me to run is I've kind of been on the outside of the Access program. When I first started university, my first week, I couldn't afford Access. $75 was just too much for me at that time. I had textbooks to buy. I didn't think it was worth it. I didn't really understand, all the benefits from it. And so I couldn't join any clubs and societies, didn't go to any events. I didn't make a lot of new friends. And my first year or my first semester was quite sad. And since then, when I finally got Access, I realized the actual great benefits that it has and how it really does make university all the things that you imagine it to be, all the fun things at least. So I think that gives me a lot of perspective and allows me to be critical of the USU because I've seen how it doesn't engage students and how students can be left out. And I think the biggest challenge for the USU in the coming years is going to be being relevant to students and engaging them. And so I think I have a lot to bring there because I understand that. And you'll see in my policies, a lot of them, they're not like Coke in the bubbler style policies. They're what students really need and what makes Access and the USU really make a difference for students.
I mean, is Access really as crucial as you say it is for students involving themselves in uni life? I mean, there are lots of parties that people can go along to, club events which you can pay admittedly a slightly higher entrance fee for, but you're not barred from coming along because of a lack of access.
Well, yeah, having Access, it means you can actually be a member of those clubs and societies, and that's where students really get involved and they really make those experiences that add value to their student or the university experience, as well as developing their skills as well through.
So I guess you're saying that for students who don't have access, they're necessarily doing uni in a less good way. They're taking their time through uni in a way that's less valuable because they lack access.
I really think so. That was kind of my experience when I got Access. It really makes a big difference, even down to the discounts.
So what about those students who choose not to get access, even if they could afford access?
Yeah, well, everyone's free to make that choice. And if they don't want to get involved in clubs and societies, that's fine for them. There's also lots of other things you can get involved in, collectives. But I still think Access is really worthwhile, and
Cool.
Yeah, and our next question is, are you in a political faction?
I am. I am a member of NLS, which is National Labour Students, the Labour Left faction here on campus.
Yeah.
What's your faction's policies, I guess? How do you describe it politically?
So it's Labour Left. It's very left-wing, very progressive on social issues.
Yeah, and how do you think that translates to a platform for the USU board?
That's an interesting question. I think definitely in terms of making the board and the USU maybe more left-wing, we have kind of seen the USU over the past few years kind of become more corporatized, which obviously is necessary to keep the USU financially feasible. But I think the USU, it also has a role to play in providing student welfare, and I think that left-wing progressive ideas is where that really happens.
Do you have any examples of a left-wing idea you think the USU should be implementing?
Well, one of my policies is a sex and consent campaign during O Week, which I think is a good example.
Yeah.
You use the word left wing a lot. What does it mean to be left wing?
I think to use more buzzwords, to be more progressive. Yeah.
In terms of being a union, how is a union? It's the USU as a service provider. For instance, how does it function as left wing?
I guess. I'm not sure.
I guess, would you want to see the USU getting involved in protests?
Well, in terms of the USU's position as in regards to activism, I think activism is more the role of the SRC. But I would like to see the USU definitely play a more supportive role in terms of supporting the SRC's activism and the SRC as a whole. I'd like to see a lot more collaboration there.
Would you vote to give money to SRC campaigns?
I mean, I would look at it on a case-by-case basis probably, but one of the main aims of the USU is to better student interests and student conditions, and a lot of the stuff that the SRC is fighting for is to do that. So I think those two aims really align. Yeah.
But surely, if you position yourself as left wing, wouldn't you take a look at the huge resources that the USU has compared to the SRC and say, well, these are resources we should be spending on direct action. We should be getting out there and mobilising students, if particularly what you want to oppose is corporatisation.
No, I really don't think that is the role of the USU. It is to provide the student experience, and I guess you're referring to the reserves of the USU that the USU has, and which is really vital to the functioning of the USU, and it spends money to perpetuate itself so it can keep providing services. If it gives out money to too many campaigns or activist endeavors you're suggesting, then there's no return on that in terms of money.
Hold on, what's the point then in billing yourself as left wing if you accept that this is a corporate entity, it's a service provider? You're talking in terms of return and finances and keeping the organisation going. If you accept all of those things, and this is about student welfare ultimately, isn't this just throwing around the buzzword of left wing, whereas the reality is very different?
No, I think the USU can still be left wing while not spending all of its resources on activist campaigns. It can still support students without running activist campaigns and without functioning in the way that SRC does.
What about students who aren't left wing?
Well, I think I think they will still feel the benefits of all the of a more left wing USU. So if the USU does, for example, support campaigns of the SRC, or for example my idea of a sexual harassment and consent campaign during O Week, students that happen to be more right wing will still feel the effects of that.
What about, presumably, would you vote, for instance, to shut the USU during NTU strikes in solidarity?
Yeah, so I am a strong unionist and I believe in solidarity, and I probably, if it were a hypothetical vote, it won't be in my hypothetical term, I probably would vote to support the strikes unless there was information made available to me as a director that proved it to be financially just unfeasible, and
So
threatening.
would that benefit students who aren't left-wing, who might want to use the USU services and wouldn't be able to for the duration?
Yeah, well, so I do believe in unionism and like solidarity, and the staff strikes were staff working conditions are student learning conditions, and I believe in the bigger idea that those strikes will benefit students in the long term.
I mean, I guess you believe this, but there are lots of
Yeah.
people who use the USU services who are militantly opposed to unionism and think that the union should be a service provider and that's it.
Sure.
So it seems like there's a tension between, on the one hand, saying the union is a corporate service provider and that you should be looking out for its bottom line so it can continue benefiting student welfare in general, but on the other hand, billing yourself as left-wing. How do you resolve that tension, particularly when some students will definitely disagree with your decision to close the union during strikes?
Yeah, sure. I think that is very valid, and there's big tension. It's big tension that plays out even on like the board itself between particular directors. But I still believe in like the long-term value of solidarity with the striking staff. And it's like the strikes were just a couple of days. Students not being able to use those outlets on those particular days is not going to, have long-lasting effects on them. It's more just a minor inconvenience.
Just one more question on like politics. Is NLS a binding faction?
Yeah, so NLS is a faction that binds on certain decisions, but it really doesn't come into play in regards to like board directors. If I were to become a director, any USU matters that I would be bringing to the caucus would just be in a purely like consultative scenario. So just asking for second opinions, advice. Also. So much of like the board business is confidential, so it can't be shared with the caucus anyway. And so I can't be bound to follow any decision because in that case, then the caucus becomes shadow directors, which is not on.
So you're guaranteeing that the caucus will never bind you on any matter?
If there were some big disagreement and I was like in the scenario where I was being pressured to bind or something, which is very unlikely because we all share similar values anyway.
Ooh. Let's just wait until it rings out. Okay.
Okay.
We can edit that. That's fine.
I can't. I've lost my line of thought.
That's okay. I think I had a follow up.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned confidential information.
Mm-hmm.
That goes in hand with certain duties which board directors have to the board. On the other hand, you're very keen to stress your left-wing commitment, which presumably comes with a set of values.
Yeah.
If you were required to do something by your board duties which you thought violated those left-wing values or wasn't in students' best interests, would you take that action and act against your duties?
Yeah. Well, I guess like this conversation or this question comes up a lot. In light of the Tom Rowley saga, from a couple of years ago, in regards to my fiduciary duties, I think I would set the bar a lot higher than Tom Rowley, and I really breaking fiduciary duties would be the absolute last option. I would pursue every single other avenue before it came to that. That being said, if I were to come into the knowledge of really extreme information about the welfare of students or something like that, then it is something that I would consider and take on the responsibilities and repercussions of that.
I think the next question is more about the USU in general. So what's the USU club or society that you value most?
That's an interesting question. I would say reviews, but they're not clubs and societies anymore. Actually, I think a really important one and maybe a bit undervalued is, or not undervalued, but a bit less known is Surge. I'm really a big fan of Surge. It's one of my policies to move it from a club and society to a program. And yeah, I think that's your question.
Let's talk about that Surge policy,
sure.
Actually. Is that really your policy?
Well, yes, I am running on it.
Is it a policy that you came up with, as opposed to the current Surge executive?
Well, so no, it's not something that I've come up with myself. I didn't just have it. I have a lot of friends involved in Surge, and I know that the Surge executive has been working on making this transition from a club to program. But I really like the idea, and I think it has a lot of potential, and I think it really needs directors' support to make it happen.
So why do you think it's important for Surge to transition to a program?
Yeah, so being a program goes hand in hand with Surge making the transition to digital radio, which will allow it to be broadcast through Sydney and on USU outlets as well. The significance of it becoming a program is it'll help it more administratively. It'll be similar to the reviews transition to programs, and that Surge would receive a lot more support, not just in funding, but in training for exec, as well as probably we'll see some extra help from the USU staff. Yeah.
At the same time, you said that it's important for a director to support this.
Yeah.
What kind of support are you going to give to this transition beyond just voting for it?
Well, I'd like to be really involved in making it happen, whether that's in a working party or however it comes into being. I'd like to work with the staff to see that the change happens in the best way for Surge.
How are you going to be framing this policy to students during the election campaign? Are you going to be standing up and saying, I have this big idea, it's to make Surge into a program, this is radical and new and you should vote for it? Or are you going to be telling the truth, which is that this is something that's already in motion and you're just committing yourself to support it?
Okay. Well, I think it's not, it is in motion, but it's still in the very early stages. I think how I'll be selling it to students, well, not selling it, but telling students about it, is Surge may not be something that they've really heard about. So I'll definitely be telling them about it and how great it is. What was your question again? How
are you going to represent whether this is a nice new shiny policy that you're bringing to them, or whether it's something which the credit can kind of more probably en bulk be claimed by the current executive?
Well, I guess I wouldn't really say that's true. We've had a lot of discussion with them, and they really appreciate the support and would really like to work with us as well. So yeah, I think I'll just be selling it truthfully to how I interpret it.
Other than obviously that policy, can you name a USU initiative or policy in recent years that has really impressed you?
So I think I would say, well, I'm a really big fan of Liliana and Adam's work in introducing more sanitary items into sanitary bins into USU bathrooms. Just kind of more broadly, I've been really impressed by Coco's work and like her revitalization of the international student portfolio, and like she's done a whole heap of work, including like making a USU WeChat to like to connect with that community more.
Yes. And then of the batch of candidates that are running this year, who are your top 3 and who do you think you'd work well with?
Okay. So first, I would probably say Connor. I really like Connor. We get along really well. I've seen him in action at like national conference and in the SRC. He's got a lot of those like collaborative skills that I think are really important on the board, and he works really hard and is very diligent. So I think he would be a good addition, and I'd love to work with him.
It's also important that he's in Senate Unity, which is not a Labour faction.
He's a Labour.
Does that influence your?
Well, I guess in terms that we share a lot of similar politics, that's probably the extent of it. Second, I would say Maya. She's another like left-wing candidate. I was really impressed by her policies, especially around like her wanting to make that like improving the relationship between the SRC and the USU, like which is something that I share as well. And third, I would say Janet. I was really impressed when I met her. She's really bright. I think she'll bring a lot of energy to the board, a lot of new ideas, and I'd really like to see her on board.
So have you done preference deals with these 3 candidates?
No, I haven't started looking at preferences. It's something that's going to happen probably not until campaigning has started proper. Who and let me get some water.
Of course, sorry.
I think, oh no.
Okay.
In terms of who I think I'll be preferencing, I'm really not sure. Like I would love to preference those candidates, but I don't want to say anything final because I haven't made a decision at all.
Of course. And out of this year's candidates as well, who do you think you wouldn't be able to work well with and why?
Yeah, I would probably say Lachlan. Like we get along fine, but we would probably just clash over our politics. He's running it as an independent, but he is a member of the Liberal Party and part of the Liberals on campus. And yeah, I really don't think that the Liberals have best interests of students at heart. And
are there any specific policies of his that you're in disagreement with?
I think his policies were fine. Yeah.
Beyond like the labelling, who's Liberal, who's Labour, who can be more progressive or do better for corporate entities, it seems like you and Lachlan have some really similar touchstones. In his interview with us, he said that he was all for student welfare and doing what was good for as many students as possible. He also mentioned that it was important for the union to be a sustainable organisation. He talked a little bit like you did in terms of returns and spending the union's budget sensibly. Are there any real differences between you?
Like I said, I think like I get along with him fine. We'd probably I'm sure we would work together fine on board. If I had to pick someone last, it would probably be Lachlan just because of his politics.
In terms of if you do get elected then, who would you vote for in the upcoming board presidential election? Okay,
so as I understand it, it's Liliana and Jacob who are interested. In that case, I'd be voting Liliana. I mostly just because I think she would make a really amazing president. I know she works really hard behind the scenes, doing a lot of the nitty-gritty, unglamorous work, as well as she's just really, really passionate about the USU, and I think she'd make a really great president. I probably wouldn't be voting for Jacob, again, the Liberal thing, as well as his conduct during the SAS AGM and stuff. I guess it's not really the conduct you can expect from a president.
Yeah. And do you support the board's affirmative action policy?
Yeah, 100%.
Would you support a similar policy for international students?
Yeah, sure. Like I would definitely, as principal, I'd like to see like how it would work exactly. But yeah, no, 100%. The international community is a huge portion of students and really important to the USU.
On another USU policy, you might be aware of recent changes to alcohol funding for clubs and societies, which mean that they can now no longer get alcohol funding unless it's at a USU outlet.
Yeah.
Do you support this policy?
Yeah, I do. I think like clubs and societies need to be drinking and like holding events where alcohol is consumed like in a safe environment, and having it on USU outlets like allows for it to be that safe environment, I think.
What makes the USU safer than other environments that also have liquor licenses?
True. I guess the fact that it's on campus, it's under like the university's security.
And then just as well, there was a lot of controversy with that change because a lot of clubs and societies executives felt like they weren't consulted properly. Okay. How do you think if you were in that board position, you would manage that change?
Yeah, well, I guess that is a fair criticism. I think a lot more like consultation, I guess, was needed. In terms of like how that would work, I guess probably I think the best method would be like meetings, like physical meetings, where like clubs and societies execs or whoever with concerns can actually talk to the directors or USU staff who's actually making a change and can express their concerns like in person.
If you think that there needed to be more consultation, do you think that there are any issues with the policy as it stands?
No, I still support the policy.
Yeah. Do you think it's the USU's role to sort of, back to the consultation question, if it is a case where the USU thinks it is the best outcome scenario for clubs and societies, even if clubs and societies disagree, do you think it is the USU's role to sort of parent that?
I guess like the USU does really need to be sensitive to the degree that clubs and societies disagree or agree, and if it is like overwhelming disagreement, then that really needs to be taken into consideration.
I think this comes up a lot with the candidates we've been talking to this year. It's really easy to say, well, the obvious thing a board director should do is act in students' best interests.
Yeah.
What is in students' best interests? When you admit that clubs and societies disagree between them immensely, how would you go about solving those disagreements and doing what you think as a board director is the right thing to do?
Yeah, well, I guess everyone does have their own interpretation of what is like in students' best interests. I think you can use a lot of like markers though, like in terms of the alcohol policy. I think like the board was thinking, or the USU was thinking that maybe parties and stuff were getting like a bit out of control. I don't know. And I think that the unions, like, their duty is more to the, like, is primarily to the safety of students as well, and maybe something that clubs and societies can't see, like the USU and directors see all the clubs and societies, like, and the USU, they see it on like a broader picture, and
Yeah. So how do you think the USU should the USU be sort of bowing to pressure from the university at times, especially considering SSAF negotiations and the like?
Yeah. No, I think the USU shouldn't bow to pressure from the university. It should be it's fundamentally a democratic student organisation, and it should be what the students want.
Yeah, but then that stuff comes into play later during SSAF negotiations and the such, and you obviously want to, I mean, for the USU's interest,
Sure.
you want to try and make it the best outcome for the union.
Yeah.
Then how would you go about negotiating the tension that exists there?
I guess there is a fine line to walk between in not jeopardizing SAF negotiations or something. But I think the union has a strong record of pursuing student interests, not always just bowing to what the university wants. And SAF negotiations, or SAF, is increasing every year.
I guess it's a tough thing, and it's one that takes a lot of dealing with people, which brings us on to, I guess, how your experience sets you up for success in this role. So, I mean, compared to some of the other candidates, you list not very much experience. You say that you're a welfare officer at the SRC and director of student publications for about 4 months of this year so far. Is that enough experience to head up a $28 million organisation?
Okay, so yeah, that's a fair question. Like I said before, my involvement with the union has been kind of slight up until this point, or up until the end of last year. But I think being involved in clubs and societies is not a prerequisite for being a good board director. I think the most important thing for directors is those collaboration skills, which I have experience in through my position as welfare officer on the SRC, and I think even more important than that is passion for the USU and dedication to get what you want done and to achieve actual change. And I think in terms of it being a $28 million organisation, I don't think really any 18, 19, 20-year-old has that kind of experience. But we still have directors, and they're still capable of learning their necessary skills that they need. I think, passion to learn that and to understand the organisation, and having a good eye for detail, and really understanding.
I guess if it's about learning on the job, then in order to learn on the job, you actually have to show up and put your foot in. In your role as Director of Student Publications for the SRC, one of your obligations is to come on a certain number of Mondays throughout the semester to read through on you before it goes to print. Is it true that you've only done that once out of 3 scheduled times?
Yes, so that is true, and it's also another very fair criticism. I guess the difference between DSP and my potential role as a board director is that there is, with a board director, if you miss 2 meetings, it's kind of without leaves of absences or apologies, it's kind of 2 strikes, you're out. With DSP, there is no kind of disciplinary action, and I actually think it's a big problem for that. So
only if
position.
You were forced to be there will you show up to?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, with DSP, I'm not the only DSP that hasn't showed up. I think it's a structural problem.
It's a very low standard to hold yourself to.
I'll finish. So, why I missed the 2 meetings was, one, I was very sick. The other, I just had to go to work. And the problem with DSP is that there's no system in place for us to really set up for someone to cover our shifts. To start with, I'm not sure who the other DSPs are, and in any case, there's no point contacting them because they don't cover their own shift. So Imogen has reached out to us and is wanting to start with having a meeting about it. But I would like to see a lot of change come to that role.
And this is a role that you receive a stipend for. It's a substantial.
No, there's no.
Stipend.
The director.
For the directorship,
Sure.
For the directorship. In which case, do you think that it's just the money that would be motivating you to participate more than with the comparable DSP role, which isn't paid?
No, definitely not. It is a paid role, so there is a lot more expectation and a lot more work is required of it as compared to DSP. And that's something that I'm fully prepared for. It's not just one Monday morning where I I just had to go to work or I was really sick. They're very different, but I do understand your criticism and yeah.
I suppose a follow-up question with the DSP is, do you intend to continue in that role if you are elected?
Probably if I was elected as a director, I would probably rescind that DSP role. I think DSP, welfare and board director would be way too much.
Yeah, and you were talking earlier about dedication and passion. All those are great. A lot of USU candidates, go up with those platforms. But much of USU day-to-day work is very heavy admin work, going through the ins and outs of policy administration, liaising with all the different offices in the USU. And like we said, obviously the experience that you have doesn't sort of promise that you can sort of step up to those administration roles. How do you think you would be able to approach them?
Well, I think administrative work and behind-the-scenes work and as well as collaborative work is really where I thrive. In my role as welfare officer, there's a lot of working behind the scenes a lot, working on policy, and I really think that I have that dedication and eye for detail. Yeah.
I guess a lot of it isn't just about stepping through policies, though.
Yeah.
It seems like, from observing what the USU does, a lot of it is about liaising with people and managing staff who are often far more experienced in their particular area than you are. I mean, some of the USU staff have been there for tens of years. You've got a policy platform, you've got a vision for the USU that you want to bring about. How can you ensure that you can actually bring that about when there might be very different views on the staff body from people who think they're more qualified to actually run this thing than a bunch of students?
Yeah, well, I guess to start with, I guess ticking off policies isn't the main role of a director. Sometimes even policies, they're not feasible when they actually come in, go into the building room or whatever. In terms of working with staff and getting your policies actually through, I don't think it's such a contentious workplace or relationship as you kind of described just then. I think it is more collaborative, and that the USU staff are really there to help the directors, and I think the directors I think the USU staff really appreciate a director that has a lot of passion and has a strong vision of what they want to get done.
So talking about the difficulty of directors achieving their policy platforms, one policy that comes up again and again is reducing the price of access or changing to some kind of different payment model. That's something which in the 4 years that I've been at uni now has been promised every year and it's never happened. Yeah. You've got a similar policy. How are you going to make that happen?
Well, I think Afterpay, introducing Afterpay or a similar application, maybe ZipPay as well, is a bit different in that it's not transforming the way access is sold or like it's not changing the amount that is being paid. It's just changing the way that it is paid, making it easier to pay and for students to budget.
So just so we can understand the logistics of that,
Yeah.
are you saying that people would still pay like the full $75, they'd have to sign some contract saying they'll pay the full $75 and then we'll be able to pay in installments?
Yeah, so how Afterpay works is like you purchase whatever it is. It's used a lot for online shopping. So in this case, you'd purchase access and you don't have to pay anything straight away. Afterpay, like the company Afterpay, pays the full price of the product and like pays it straight to the seller, so the union in this case, and the student then pays back the $75 in installments. So it's $18.75 over 2 months. So $18.75 every 2 weeks.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I guess for students who are the ones who really can't access, who really can't afford access at the moment, is this going to make such a big difference? I mean, $18.75 is still substantial when you consider that people are living close to like the Australian poverty line.
No, sure. So this definitely wouldn't be to replace the current like low SES access scheme. I think that really needs to be expanded. I think it's not advertised enough as well, and I think if Afterpay were to like increase membership significantly, then the money from that could definitely be used to expand the low SES access scheme.
So do you expect that Afterpay will increase membership?
I really think that it could, it has the potential to make a big difference. $75 is such a lot of money for students and stops a lot of people from buying it. Yeah.
Also, are you suggesting sort of outsourcing the actual like logistics of it to Afterpay?
Yeah. So not outsourcing, like Afterpay or ZipPay.
Or contracting them.
I'm not exactly sure how the
logistics would work.
Yeah, the logistics works. So Afterpay offer this service for all different types of stores, and it would be like integrated into the current payment system. It's like when you pay for something online, you have the option to use like PayPal. It's similar to that.
Do you know if it's something that can actually be done? Because I don't know too much about Afterpay, but it just seems like kind of new to me.
No, yeah, definitely. I think it's completely feasible. That's why I'm running on it.
You think it's feasible, or you know that like it's something that can actually?
Well, I would definitely like to find out the USU staff's opinion, and
I don't know, in terms of actually liaising with Afterpay or EasyPay or like a third party company who would handle it.
Yeah, sure. I don't see why there would be any problems with it. In the end, the USU is still paid, and Afterpay or ZipPay, whoever, is still paid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The definition of a member of the USU in the USU Constitution is something like somebody who has paid their fees. That entitles you then to the benefits of membership.
Yeah.
How are you going to navigate that? Seems like you've got a kind of legal difficulty in that students won't actually have paid their fees up until the payment is complete.
Yeah. Well, so in the eyes of the USU, it will be that they have paid instantly because Afterpay pays, foots their fee immediately.
Okay. One of your other policies then is for student music lunchtimes at Herman's.
Yeah.
How is this different from what Funch already does, like on a Wednesday, or when there are like Wednesday USU events on Eastern Avenue that involve live student music performances?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's just another expansion with the focus being on Herman's and improving that outlet particularly, as well as putting a spotlight on student musicians and supporting them. The idea of them performing at lunchtime, it would be a paid role, and is something that was happening at Manning a couple of years ago. And I'd really like to see it happen at Herman's.
Do you think, I mean, since the renovation at Herman's, a lot of criticism we've been hearing is that now the space is no longer fit for live performance.
Oh, okay.
Is that a concern that you have?
No, I think like the current like floor space is very large and a bit underused. I think there's definitely room to introduce a stage or a performance area, and I think having like the outdoor portion makes it a really good choice for that.
On then another one of your policies, you talk about introducing clean energy during the Wentworth reconstruction.
Yep.
What do you mean by clean energy here?
So it would obviously have to be like figured out in relation to the actual building that is going to be constructed and what's going to work for that building. I mean, a good starting point would be solar panels. Obviously, I'm not an engineer. I'm not sure what's going to work best for that particular building. But there is a lot of technology out there that can incorporate like clean energy into the design.
It seems like the level of detail that you just gave us, saying that you can't be sure what the energy will be, along with the way that the policy itself is framed, which is that you'll demand clean energy. It seems very much like this is a radical platform rather than a meaningful policy that a board director of a corporate entity with $28 million of budget might put into place. Is this something that's just too like diffuse for you to achieve?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. So the reason it has to be vague is the plans for Wentworth are like still ongoing. The details haven't been finalised at all, and now is the time to be for the USU to be demanding like what they want from that space. And like Wentworth probably will not be built in my university career time. But it will be very soon after that, and like now is the time to be making our demands known, because it's the time that like the building is being developed, or the plans for the building are being developed, and yeah.
Would you also support a name change
for Wentworth? Oh yeah, certainly.
I think the final policy that we wanted to ask about was your policy for an O-Week Sex and Consent Festival or campaign, that's the word, as well as trained first responders.
Yeah.
Why the focus on O-Week?
Well, it's the focus on O-Week. O-Week is in light of like the findings from the Broderick Review and the Red Zone report, which found which both reports and other investigations as well have identified O-Week as the peak time for assaults to occur. 1/8 of all sexual assaults in the university year occur during O-Week, which is a phenomenal amount. And yeah, so that's why the focus is on O-Week.
I think that's really commendable. There have been recent concerns though as well that a lot of club and society events throughout the year are plagued by sexual assault or suggestions of it. I mean, there were recent issues with Subski that tended in that direction.
Yep.
Would you support trained responders appearing at more club and society events?
Yeah, definitely. I think a campaign at O-Week, as well as the training of more first responders and just club and execs training in general. I think the campaign at O-Week is just the starting point. I would definitely like to see it expanded. Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think that's all we have. So
cool.
Let's leave it there.
All right.